Okay, so we have club-sponsored activities that were held this month. And the first one was at Spirit Lake. It was a Los Alamos Mountaineers and PEEC sponsored trip led by Zach Baker and Jean Dewart. Looks a little snowy and icy up there. Next. I also led a trip to North Wash Canyons. We did Hogwarts, Miss Piggy, and Hog 2 Canyons this last weekend. David Hand was our co-leader, and all our team players were Evan Rose, John Pianese, John Davey, Tony Taylor, and Stuart Trugman. We all came out without a scratch. Very thankful for that. It was a very good trip. Next. Antone Flat Llama Trip, which was October 8th through the 17th, was organized by Bill Prodorsky. This was a view of the camp Tuesday morning, very snowy, and there were day hikes in every direction. Next. There are some pictures of the participants on that trip: Kathleen, Kitty, Dennis, France, and Patty. And BJ Orozco leading the llama crew, hauling them into camp. Next. Kathleen is at a reflecting pool and there are waterfalls running after the storm. Very pretty. And that sunset from camp is amazing. Next. Okay, then we also had reports on individual trips. Cougar Canyon was led by Patty Hubley, and also Evan Rose and Steve Renault were participating in that trip, and they reported on beautiful scenery and a lot of fun rappels and down climbs. In Zion National Park, there was canyoneering and subway, mystery, and Diana's Throne. Participants in that were Laura and Roy Bond, John Davey, Steve Renault, and Evan Rose. Fun photos there. Larry and Laura Cox, they went to Palacio Wash Trail in Espanola. Now we have upcoming trips. So Ross Lemons is going to lead a fall color bike ride to the Gilman Tunnels. You can find more information on the Los Alamos Mountaineers website. Technicality is intermediate, difficulty moderate, and dogs not allowed. That's this coming weekend. We also have the Moab bike hike and explore. It's full with a waiting list, so contact Bill if you're interested in a waiting list position. Also at Bluff, Utah, there's hiking. There's 2 spots left there, and you will need to find your own lodging. That's in December. So if anybody else is interested in leading a trip, please take a look at our guidelines for trip leaders. It was just recently updated. And give anybody on the board a call if you need any additional help. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Okay, Rod McCready here, right? Let's see, I set up the programs for the club. I do have a speaker for November, so the next set of talks we'll be looking for speakers for is in December. And that's when we normally have 6 10-minute talks of smaller adventures. So if you want to give a talk, contact me. I'll be sending out a call for talks on email soon. So be thinking about that, please. Tonight's speaker, Jen Foote, somebody I met when I first moved to town in 1999 because of our mutual interest in caving. And I would say I have an interest, but Jen has a real passion for caving, and you're going to pick that up from her talk. I cave recreationally, I would say, but Jen's way into it. She probably goes into caves for fun once in a while, but mostly when I hear about her trips, they're about cleaning up caves, rebuilding formations that had gotten broken by vandalism, biological expeditions, particularly concerning bats, and caving and surveying missions. So I would say her caving resume is second to none. I was really happy to hear that she recently turned her career toward caving. She was working as a civil engineer for a long time, but now she's the cave program manager for Lincoln National Forest. And I'll stop talking now and let's welcome Jen Foote.
See here, get this shared. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I quickly put together a presentation, just sort of caving all around the world as well as locally here in New Mexico. Hopefully I can get other people excited about caves and introduce you to some of the amazing things that can be found there. So I want to also give credit to a bunch of the photographers. I unfortunately lost track as I was downloading photos from Facebook, but some of them came from Quintana Roo Cave Maps, Photo Phil, Aaron Stockton, James Hunter, Aaron Lynch, Kevin Manley, Hazel Barton, Dave Fennell, Gretchen Baker, and Bryce Smith. So this year is actually the International Year of Caves and Karst. It's put on by the Union Internationale de Speleologie, along with hundreds of partner organizations. And their goal is to spread information about caves. They've got a website where you can learn more about caves. They've got a bunch of programs on there that you can watch if you want to find out more. This week is also Bat Week, and which is an international celebration of the role of bats in nature. Talks about their usefulness in food production, eating mosquitoes, and just lots of neat things about bats, trying to get people to love them and not be scared of them. This is a karst map of the world. The red blobs are the limestone areas. And so those are some of the areas that I've visited in search of caves. So the first trip that I thought, hey, I could go caving in exotic locations, I took in 2001. I emailed the local grottos in New Zealand, and eventually Photo Phil emailed me back and said, yeah, sure, I'll take you caving. He picked me up at the airport and then brought me out to their caving hut and met up with some Swiss cavers who were also visiting, and we all went caving. And I got to borrow the world's largest carbide lamp. Those are the old style of headlamps. They are basically acetylene torches on your head. And now we have upgraded to much safer LED lamps. Then in 2005, one of my friends from college was getting married, and he's originally from Brazil. And so went to his wedding and thought, hey, I bet there's caves in Brazil. So I looked it up in the Lonely Planet book and got directions to this state park and rented a car and just drove out there. As we would get to a junction in the road or we would see any people, There weren't really signs anywhere, so we were just hoping that the directions that we had gotten were correct. We'd ask people, hey, Tarahonka, and sort of point, and they would laugh at us and then, nod, yes, you're going the right way. And so we just drove like that for 4 hours into the wilderness. And eventually we found, as promised, the guide for the caves in that state park. He actually lives there, and for $20 a day, we camped in his yard. They fed us meals and then took us caving. Every time I seem to go on a trip with guides, there's always this mysterious insect or tree that if you touch it will kill you or make you break out in a horrible rash. And so he had his little display box here of these caterpillars that we were not supposed to touch. You can see a little bit. They've got some spines here, but evidently it will really mess you up if you touch these. So we had our guidance. This is the entrance to the main cave in the state park. It is also used as like a church site, and for some reason it has streetlights installed even though there's no electricity in the area. It's plans for the future, I guess. A river runs through the cave. It has, I think, 5 entrances. And so we traversed through all of those, which was also exciting because I don't swim. And he was very nice and would hold my hand as we walked through the river to make sure I didn't slip and drown. Here's our guide in one of the more spectacular caves with these really special helictites sticking out of the formations. And then one of the next trips I did, this was actually a grotto trip. And somehow we had gotten involved with these archaeologists who needed the caves surveyed. So they were doing archaeology and we had the mapping skills. And so we would go out there and map the caves for them. And the one trip we also repaired formation. This had evidently been broken by some photographers. It was a much larger formation than we had been told before we got there, but we were able to epoxy it and put it back standing upright in place. Haven't been back to see if it's still there, if it's held up. This is a formation that was purposefully removed as part of climate studies. So they can go from a stalagmite and actually count the rings. They change, like with the monsoon seasons. So you can count the age of them and back to the glacial ages. They've got records from these stalagmites throughout the world. And then they had put this glass plate on there to see how quickly it would redeposit. This was really cool, some sort of a cat jaguar skeleton that we saw in one of the caves. And this is some of the prehistoric pottery, the largest one that we saw in one of the caves. And as you can see, it's in a pretty restricted area, and that's why it's been preserved. We also got to see vampire bats. They're hanging, this cave had a bunch of string in it that people had left for trails so they wouldn't get lost. And these cute little vampire bats were hanging from it. And one of the byproducts of that was that from their waste products, it leads to bad air in the cave. So James and I were taking photos of this graffiti to see if there was something we could maybe do later to help repair it. And we realized that we were just laughing hysterically and pointing at things. And then we went, maybe the oxygen levels are not so good here. So, so then we headed out. My first experience with bad air. And we did remove a lot of string from the cave. Did a little bit of restoration activities in there to bring it back. I also had the opportunity, so 10 years ago, I actually gave a Mountaineers talk on my trip to China. So I didn't put a lot of slides from that in here, but it still was a very cool experience to talk about briefly again. The cave entrances there are really huge. You can see down in the lower right-hand side, there's a person for scale at this entrance, and of course the trees. The caves are famous for their airflow. They were even able to fly kites inside the cave because there's so much airflow even in a large passage like this. This is the house where we stayed. It's now been replaced with a concrete building, which is really sad. But there's bamboo in the front, and this dark shadow in the back is actually the cave entrance. And there, again, they did have electricity. They were given televisions to get the news and everything, but we got to have campfires in the living room to try and stay warm. It was unusually cold that trip that I was on. And this is some more of the big passage. It was stream passage. Our goal was to try and connect 200-kilometer long caves through some of these low crawls while the water was down, but it still has not been connected. And there they also had bats. This is a really cute horseshoe bat. Got great big ears and a funny nose. This is some of the virgin passage that we were able to survey there. Really amazing big passage. This is actually the last trip I went on right before COVID. We went over Christmas time, and it turned out everybody else also wanted to go. So getting our permits at the border took 5 hours, which is not normal. It took us 10 minutes on the way back. And we're going to this area, Laguna de Sanchez, which this is the Texas border. So you just drive down, you go around Monterey. And we actually came in from this side on this trip, and on previous trips, we came through the mountains this way. But you can sort of see there's all these parallel ridges there. This project's been going on since 1997. They are going for Thanksgiving. If anybody is interested in a big adventure, and I've gone on this project 3 times. This is a view from the mountain pass. This is when it floods, this fields becomes lakes, and so that's the town Laguna de Sanchez. And then we're caving in the next valley over. And you can see there's these wonderful limestone hills, agave plants. This trip, I had learned that when people said to pack light, it didn't necessarily mean super light and have everything in a little teeny, I called it my coffin tent. And then the rest of my gear had to be in a trash bag outside because it was raining. And then other people had nice big giant tents, and they had not packed as light as I had. So that was a good lesson to learn. This is the biggest cave there. This was sort of the reason they had discovered the whole area. Was it's a bat maternity roost in the summer. So the caving trips are always in the winter. But this is a view I took from the bottom looking up as someone's rappelling in, and on the right, we have somebody rappelling down and taking a picture as they're rappelling down. The little circle of light in the bottom is a person who's already down there. This is one of my favorite pictures from the trip. This is a person checking out a cave to see if it goes. And of course, we have big campfires there, hang out, tell stories. And the other cave project that I've participated in Mexico is in Quintana Roo. It's south of Cancun, sort of all down the coast here. This is a map of the underwater caves that are near Tulum, but there's also some above water caves. And as you can see, they're just basically the whole coast is all of these caves that are sort of, you know, draining the mainland towards the ocean. So I did actually go to the beach on these trips. I don't spend all of my time underground. And we went to a little theme park. But in the theme park, we were actually surveying the caves. This is an example of the maps that we're making. And this one shows the interaction between the underwater parts of the caves are just these lines. And then the above water parts also have water in them quite often. And then we have the dry land. The karst, the rock surface is actually pretty thin around there. In some places, it's only a couple of feet thick. The freeway collapses every once in a while because they've built it right on top of this. But the hope is that some of this mapping and surveying we can do, they can start to avoid these features in the future. They also have problems with sewage and trash in these. And hopefully if we can get them located and mapped, they can like avoid them more often. Another picture of the pretty parts of the cave. And there's really amazing fossils in there. This was one that I actually had to swim through to survey, which was pretty scary for me. Sort of clung to the walls so that I wouldn't, you know, imaginarily float away or get sucked into a sump. But it's pretty challenging to survey in the water, especially we have these electronic disto X's now that you can't get wet. So we had to keep them out of the water while treading water and shooting the stations. Some of the dangers there, these holes in these plants are where ants make their nests inside of these giant thorns. And evidently, if you touch them, the ants will swarm you. So it's both plant and animal hazards. This is an amblypygid, which looks really scary, but they don't really seem to be very interested in people. They run away if you touch their antennas very quickly. They are very, very fast, which makes them very creepy. Cave scorpions, they have no coloring because they're living in the dark all the time. And in this cave, it was a crawlway cave, and we came upon this, which, as you can see by the scale, is probably only a little over an inch long. Well, no, 2 inches long. And supposedly it's a baby coral snake, just doesn't have its colors yet. And it is attempting to eat a frog that is quite large for its size. But I came crawling up on this and I was like, you know, what is it? And we finally figured out, oh, it's a snake. It's not like a strange three-legged snake or a frog or whatever. And above in the top of the picture, you can see this is the eggs. There were hundreds of broken eggshells, and we were basically crawling on snakes that were hidden in the cobbles. So it was quite creepy. I didn't like that one. So access requirements for going to caves is different everywhere. You typically just get in touch with your local caving club and they'll tell you what the system is there. In USA, you usually need a permit for federal lands, but not always. And for private land, you usually talk to the landowners. This is a karst map of the United States. It's got the carbonate limestone karst, evaporate karst, which is salt and gypsum, and volcanic pseudokarst. And as you can see, New Mexico is pretty lucky to have all three of them. So instead of 14ers, which is what I'm imagining the Mountaineers are putting on their to-do lists, we have the long caves lists. And so New Mexico actually has 3 on the long cave list. Lechuga Cave that I know you've had several presentations on, Fort Stanton Cave, and Carlsbad Caverns. So with the deepest caves, there's an argument over whether lava counts as a cave. So the deepest limestone cave in the USA, but only 310 on the world's deepest cave list, is Tears of the Turtle in Montana at 1,863 feet deep. I don't have the depth for Hawaii's cave, but so the deepest official cave in the USA is Kazumura, but being a lava tube, the distance from the surface is never more than about 100 feet. But from the top of the volcano down to the ocean, it has a lot of vertical distance. So this is another view of the beautiful mountain limestones up there in Montana. This is our water supply in a cave, and pretty much a lot of these caves you'll see there's just this plastic pitcher, which we use as our water sources in a lot of the caves that we're camping in. But in this area with the karst, there's no surface water. All the water is underground, at least up top in the mountains. This is the cave one of the cave entrances that we went to. Even in late summer, it's plugged up with snow almost, and you crawl over it and then into the rest of the cave. And this is what some of the cave passage looks like. The caves are very cold and very wet, so you end up not taking out your camera very often. So here I am at the official deepest cave, Kazumura in Hawaii. And it's actually it goes under some housing developments. And so one of the local landowners gives tours. And we were able to go on one of those and see the cave. And here's some more of what that whole Hawaii lava tube area looks like. Just black holes everywhere. I also, one of my friends had a free buddy ticket for Alaska. So we split the price and each got to fly there for, I think it was like $250, which is a really great deal. And we visited a friend that was working on Prince of Wales Island, where they have a bunch of caves. And as you can see, the forest there is really thick. It's hard to get through the forest to get to the caves. And here you can see, like, unless you're on the road, the rest of it is just super thick and difficult to get to. So there's plenty still unmapped caves there. And we also got to enjoy some of the lovely seafood. We had fresh crab that we pulled out of the ocean, and shrimp, and I don't know, some other kind of fish things. I don't eat a lot of meat, but it was really good just to have that fresh local seafood. And then this is me at the entrance of the El Capitan Cave, which is a Forest Service tour cave there. And I've also been caving in Missouri, and one time while in a canoe, we were paddling down the river and could actually take the canoe into the cave. And in Florida, their caves, they call dry when there's any air in them, when they're not just scuba diving caves. But there are some really neat fossils in there, with sand dollars just sticking out of the ceiling. Of course, I've also been caving in what we like to call Colorado. Most of their caves are not large passages, but there is some beautiful flowers in the early summer if you get up there. Then South Dakota has one of the caves I've been doing a lot of survey in is Wind Cave, which is famous for its box work. This is some of the passage that I've been lucky enough to survey. Very small vertical slot. And of course, that box work is not so wonderful to be crawling around in. It'll really slice you up. Also got to participate in the Great Expectations Resurvey Project, which is the National Caving Group. It's one of their preserves in the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming. This is the Velcro chimney, which you have to climb up 30 feet in. This is the Great Hall. I think it's the largest cave passage in Wyoming. And it's got really nice bedding planes in it. And I am back here at this last little light dot. I make caves look big. This is the cephalopod malt shop. More fossils. Some of these are like the size of wagon wheels, and some nice soda straws as well. It is a cold cave and wet. This summer, also got to go out to California during that 1 month break when we thought we could run around again if we were vaccinated. And this is somebody rappelling into this lava tube, which ended up being about a half a mile long. This was not the cave that we were looking for. But we ended up at it. We never found the cave that we were looking for. We found 3 others. And this is, somebody told me to be a cave model. So we had a little bit of fun there. And they had spectacular ice in the caves there. Again, cold. So now finally we're to our local New Mexico adventures. This summer, so I started work last October for the Forest Service in the Guadalupe Mountains down by Carlsbad. And I got to take out a bunch of biological interns to go caving and look for biology in the caves. And the first day we went out, it started raining, and it started raining really, really, really hard. They didn't understand how bad it was, but it's the first time I've seen waterfalls there. The whole hillside was really steep and loose. I thought somebody was going to fall off a cliff. I thought we were all going to get hypothermia, even though it was August. But yeah, so it ended up okay. They were all really tough. And luckily the cave was warmer than it was outside. So we were able to warm up again. But yeah, this looks like a tropical country and not New Mexico. In March, when it had right when the closures hadn't quite started yet, we decided to stay in state and just went to see caves in the Gila. So much smaller caves than normal, but it's still a cave. So it's still a fun trip to take in my eyes. Being obsessed with caves. Oops, got that one twice. One of the local projects that we have is the Gypsum Karst project, mapping caves in that triangle of nothingness between Roswell, Vaughn, and Corona. As you can see, you know, there's not much vegetation there, so it's typically pretty easy to see the openings, but you never know what you'll find inside, whether it's just rattlesnakes or if it's booming cave passage. So this is one of the bigger adventures I had, again, involving rain. But we had this nice peaceful entrance with the datura flowers. But after about an hour, I got really nervous because when we had gone in, it was cloudy. So I came out and I saw these skies, and it was pretty scary. Ended up with hail that was 2 inches big. Broke the windows on the car while I was huddled inside of it. Broke the mirrors. And so then I went back down once it stopped to go check the cave entrance. And it was in fact taking a lot of water, because these gypsum caves are basically the water conduits. And so there were several crawlways past this point, which meant that the guys that had stayed in the cave were temporarily stuck. But there luckily was a skylight. So I got a rope from the car and we rigged up what we call a meat anchor. So we got the person who was the best climber and the lightest, and I anchored them, you know, using also the friction from the dirt. And then they were able to climb out of this hole because the main passage had too much water in it for them to get out. And then the adventure wasn't quite over yet, because the roads were all flooded. There was about 1 foot of water on the roads. And we did get stuck and had to pull each other out. We had several vehicles at least. This is Edgewood Cave, which Joan Lyles here actually now owns. It is a 19-inch culvert that goes down for 90 feet. And so you have to rappel and climb in it. And this is one of our scientist friends who actually did fit and go down and up all on his own. We didn't have to pull him up, but he is certainly filling that 19 inches. This is a picture of me rappelling down that tube, what it looks like. The cave does have amazing fossils. These are crinoids. And this is the cross section that you're used to seeing. This is a cave that has formed down here by Carlsbad in the mine waste. So from the potash mines, this is the mud and dirt that they've dug out of it and deposited on the surface, and it's super soluble. So it has now turned into a temporary cave system. You have to be really careful when you go there because it's very unstable, but it's very cool looking. This is Carlsbad in the mountains at night. This is the oil and gas fields off in the distance. Sometimes it's hard to navigate in the daytime as well. We get these big fog storms that roll in. These are Barbary sheep on top of the cliffs there, which is pretty cool looking. There was like 20 of them up there just hanging out, enjoying the breeze. This is some of the small caves that we have to pass through. Some of the vertical work that we do, going down on the ropes. This is another view from above. This is a person rappelling down with another person down at the bottom. Looking up to somebody on a ledge here. I forgot to make this one big. Cave entrance, nice big one. Another nicely lit cave view with the formations down here in my forest. This is one of the really beautiful spots that we have. This area is closed. There's probably just a trip every couple of years back there because it's so special and difficult to get to. And even on the surface, there's really cool karst features that you can see hiking around in the canyons. And at night, it does get pretty hard to navigate coming up these cliffs. There's no trails. And yeah, so the big caves, I know you guys have seen a lot of presentations on those, so I didn't include a lot on them. But Carlsbad Caverns, we're doing some survey projects in there. So when you go there, you start out with the little reflective volunteer vests. And then when nobody's watching, you go off trail and you can start your survey. One of the other projects we did down there that I got to participate in was this cable covering project. They put in a new lighting system with LED lights, saves energy, supposed to be better for algae growth to prevent it. But when they did that, the electricians did not hide the cables very well. So you had these big black cables running through everywhere that were very visually ugly. So we used the natural cave materials. We would try and dig a little trench and bury the lines for the cables. We would make mud that we could paint onto the cables to sort of lessen the brightness of the color. Very rewarding project, on hold now. Fort Stanton Cave with Snowy River, which is the longest, I think they call it the longest formation in the world. It's, I think, about 10 miles long with this calcite coating that's, and this cave also floods. And so it hasn't been visited in a while. I think they had one trip this year and then it flooded again. So, oh, and then, so this is one of the adventurous, not so safe things that we did. But in the cave, there, a lot of those, in order to get to that Snowy River passage, they had to dig through 30 feet of rubble. And so several of the big passages in the cave, ones that aren't damaged and look beautiful, were accessed by these cave digs, but it does leave some unstable areas. So one of our tasks had been to actually remove some of the unstable rocks, which meant that we had to basically bury ourselves in the cave and then dig ourselves out again. So it was quite exciting. So here we are, sort of poking the rocks with a stick. And there goes the whole hillside and buries our way out. It wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be, but it's definitely a different experience to realize what you're doing. But we had 3 people on the outside to help us, as well as 3 people on the inside. And with some good planning, we did it safely. It was definitely an adventure. We had sleeping bags and food for a couple days in case it was worse than it was. Oh, okay. Lechuguilla Cave. Tried to get some different photos than what you normally see. This is the Easter Bunny having a talk with one of our cavers. This is what he ate. It is a mix of ramen and eggs and cashews, and that is all he ate the entire week, was this mush. It didn't taste bad, but a whole week of it would not be great. Our ubiquitous water pitchers again. And on one of my trips, we actually got to go out early. One of the people had to go on Army assignment, so we had permission to escort her out, and it turned out it was raining on the surface, so we actually got to stick our feet in a little river, which is very unusual, before heading back in. And as you can see, we're already a little bit dirty, but everyone was jealous. We got to clean off. Again, the normal pretties that you get to see from Lechuguilla. And I thought I would end it with picture me and Rod in Yellow Jacket Cave from 2003. Oldie but a goodie. And if anyone has questions, this is the caves.org is the national caving group where you can learn about your local grottos and other caving information. And there is the International Year of Caves and Karst webpage also.
All right, so we do have a couple questions, several, actually many. So do you bring oxygen sometimes with you in case you reach areas with bad air?
No, not in the ones I've been in. There are some like Cueva de Villa Luz where they actually have like sulfuric acid where they do it. If in general, we know which caves are going to have bad air and you can seasonally avoid them. There's some in Texas where they'll go and actually pump air in like a day or two before they go in just to circulate the air. But in general, we don't have a lot of bad air in the caves that I go in, at least. It's usually more of a tropical thing, but we sort of are aware of the signs. And if it's a known dangerous area, you can bring an air monitor and see if it's getting worse and worse, and then turn around if it gets bad. But usually just seasonal, going in the right season and being aware of the symptoms. You know, we're like, oh, you know, we're acting pretty silly. But in general, the ones I've been in hasn't really been unsafe. You just get a little bit stupid.
Okay. Nice. Good to know. How do you disinfect your climbing equipment after visiting a cave before going to others?
So right now, the most common procedure is to soak it in the 121 Fahrenheit water for 5 minutes, 121 or 131, I forget. But like I have a sanitized cycle on my clothes washer. And so all my clothes will do that. and the soft parts of the climbing gear. And then you can also spray things with alcohol, 70% isopropyl, that you don't want to get as wet as soaking. Or you can rub it with isopropyl wipes, things like cameras. And yeah,
Okay.
you bag everything. It's sort of a procedure we've gotten used to. When you get out, you bag all your stuff, change your clothes, take it home.
Nice. Okay, so a couple other equipment study questions. This one is, what type of equipment do you use to survey a cave?
So like when I started, we had measuring tapes and compasses and clinometers. And now we've pretty much moved just to these electronic lasers that are all in one unit that you shoot and measure the distance and the vertical angle and the horizontal angle. And somebody writes it in a book and plots it out and then draws an artistic representation of the map. Some people are doing it with LiDAR lasers now. You can bring that in and make a whole point cloud. But in a small, crawly, miserable, wet cave, that's not really technically feasible. And they have gotten waterproof boxes for the distos now so that they can do them with the underwater cave diving, and map the caves that way instead of just, they used to like count knots on the string.
Wow.
But so yeah, they're able to use the lasers now too, and it's a lot more accurate.
Cool. We've come a long way with technology. That's for sure.
Yes.
Do you have to carry water in with you to dry caves in Florida?
Yeah, I would not drink the water. Yeah, the ones like when we're drinking the water in the caves in Montana, you know, you're at the top of a mountain. There's not really much human impact there. It's just us basically, and maybe a couple other hikers coming through, but we're 15 miles from a road. And in La Chiquilla, it's like 700 feet below the surface. And they have tested the water to make sure that it's doesn't have E. coli in it or anything. And we use the pitchers to keep the water clean so that we're not contaminating it with the pools. And you don't touch the pitcher to your water jar. You're very careful about it.
Okay. How do you communicate in caves? No cell phone reception, right? Do you use radios?
There's some cave radios that have been made, but in general, we just yell at each other.
Good old-fashioned way.
When you're down there, you're in the true wilderness. You're responsible for yourself. You have to be careful because if there's an accident, it's going to take probably days to get you out. You know, unless it's just unless it's Carlsbad Caverns.
Right.
They got the elevator.
Okay. Do you ever help with bat studies when caving?
Yeah. I haven't done any in the last few years. So there's the white nose syndrome that started, I think 11 years ago now in New York State. It's now in New Mexico. And yeah, so I used to do a lot of volunteer bat counts for the BLM and Forest Service. And I mean, I guess I still do them for the Forest Service, but now they want to do swabbing of the bats, which the biologists do. And I'm not trained for that, so I don't touch the bats. We just look at them from far away. So we do like entrance monitoring sometimes, just count how many bats are coming out. We have fewer bats here than they do at Carlsbad Caverns, where they have, you know, hundreds of thousands of bats. Here we just have hundreds. So they're much easier to count.
Cool. Okay. Are most cave trips day trips, or like how many caves have you actually camped in?
The camping has just probably been in Mexico and in La Chiquilla. I haven't camped in like Jewel Cave yet, so it's just the 100-mile caves. It seems like or you know, sometimes if you're it's a good shelter in some of the jungle countries, but a lot of times we are just staying in houses and doing it as day trips
Okay.
most of the time.
Is there a search and rescue group for caving in New Mexico? A cave search and rescue?
No.
Okay.
There's training nationally for rescue. There's I'm working with the Park Service and the BLM and the Eddy County Search and Rescues, and we're starting some trainings locally within the area, but it's still pretty new and it's not an official group or anything. We're just sort of interagency, you know, meeting each other and getting familiar with it. But especially with COVID, we haven't been able to go to any of the national training. So there's not really a specific cave group in New Mexico that's assigned to that. It's officially the state police is in charge of cave rescues, except in the national parks. They have their own.
Okay. So this one I'm curious about as well, watching you squeeze through tiny little tunnels. How do you deal with claustrophobia and how do you avoid getting injured? Very broad.
Yeah, with claustrophobia, sometimes I make the big person go first, and I know if they fit that I will. As I'm getting older, I'm getting more claustrophobic. I've seen that one tight spot I had, one of the people on our trip did sort of get stuck in there for about 2 minutes. And when that happens, you have to you can't panic or your chest will expand and make you bigger. Mm-hmm. So you have to, you know, just breathe slowly and stay calm. But yeah, it's either you don't go into those small areas if you have a problem with it, is the best way to avoid claustrophobia. And to avoid getting injured, I'm careful. You know, I don't run and jump in caves. I yell at other people if they start going too fast, and just, you know, start slow with the easy stuff. And as you get more comfortable with it, you know, you can start doing harder and harder things, but yeah, just be careful. Keep in mind what you're doing.
Okay. So Kevin did reply to that and he said he wasn't stuck.
he got out, but it took a couple minutes.
Nice. Okay. Well, I'm glad
he had to try each direction. He had to try the left side, the right side.
So you've never seen when someone get like so stuck that they couldn't get out?
No.
You can just leave someone behind in a tunnel somewhere.
Yeah, that's not a good policy. Yeah.
Definitely. Let me see if I missed anything. You did El Mayapis, right?
El Malpai.
Malpai.
Yeah, I think I ended up taking those pictures out in the end.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a lava tube area, another national monument. I think they have maybe 5 caves that are open to the public right now. And yeah, they've got some really nice long lava tubes there as well, that when it's not COVID times, we've had the local groups have been volunteering to survey at.
Okay, cool. Okay, it looks like that's the end of the questions. We'll give everyone a second while I'm just wrapping things up. So Jen, thank you so much for sharing all
Welcome.
those amazing photos and all the information about your adventures. You've had many of them.
Yes.
And it's amazing to see. Thank you so much. And for everyone that's listening tonight, thank you so much for joining us for this Mountaineers meeting. Let me just check to see. I think we just got a question. Oh, nope, just lots of thank yous. Great presentation, good photos, lots of good encouragement there. So if anyone would like to join PEEC for other programs, please do. We do have a local documentary screening this Friday called Hauntings of the Atomic City. And that's Friday, October 29th at 6:30. And again, visit the PEEC website, please, if you would like to learn more about our programs. So let me check one more time for questions. Nope, just more thank yous. I think we're good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Everyone have a great evening.